let's not talk about overt and covert racism. That mean open and hidden racism. Times are gone when we had open or overt racism. Now people who are involved, or institutions who are involved in racism, they rely more on hidden or covert ways. What they do is they do not directly call somebody or some race as bad. Rather, they introduce such discourses which make those things or people look like inferior to themselves. So they use indirect, covert ways to implement their racism in the society. And this is very interestingly found in contemporary Western societies, according to scholars. That and the reference has been given on your screen. And they found that in Western cultures, since it has become a kind of objectionable thing uh, to discriminate between people based on their race, and this is considered to be a kind of prejudice, then people have adopted indirect ways to reflect on or to show their racist views. There is now a new crop of words which is used to convey the same sentiment indirectly. For example, we have the words like multiculturalism. We have the terms like integration, diversity. These terms are used to apparently avoid any discriminatory or racist views, but indirectly they implement, rather reinforce the same sentiments or feelings which they try to hide. Because when we talk about diversity, there is always a feeling that something is divided inside, and in that way there would be something superior or something inferior. So these discourses, practically speaking, these keywords are actually in practice are dividing people more than merging them together. They are creating more racist feelings. Maybe they may be less hurting as compared to open racism or racist views, but they still are reinforcing some kind of racist sentiments, which has come to us through various studies in critical discourse analysis. A pressing issue for many serious scholars in the 21st century is to how to account for racism in post-racial era. By post-racial era, we mean the era which has declined to follow an open racist mindset, and now racism or racist views are shown or expressed indirectly. This is an era in which racism tends to be associated with individual prejudice, ignorance, and backwardness as compared to an institutional policy, and that result into some kind of direct manifestation of stereotypical typical beliefs about certain people. And this is how it is furthered and it is promoted in certain societies. The indirect and pervasive ways in which speaker reproduce racism through less salient practices remain unchecked and are even defended as intrinsically tied to democratic values. For example, some seriously hurting, sarcastic, or racist views about a community or an individual may be given a go ahead on the name of freedom of speech, or on the name of democratic values or the promotion of democratic values, one's individual freedoms. But we need to, whenever we seek some kind of freedom of this nature, we need to see not only as an individual but as institutional groups, that is it hurting or detrimental to a certain other group or individual or not. That's very important to be checked these days. As Hill puts it, covert forms of racism do not precipitate the exchange of accusations and rationalizations and denials that we see in other kinds of practices, such as, for example, the use of slurs or generalizations when referring to particular groups. Indirect racism work in a sophisticated manner. It doesn't open open generalizations about others or kind of abusing words about others. However, this indirect racism still draws on interest-saving legitimizations of what is normal, natural, or better in a particular context. They try to provide some kind of rationale for what is being furthered in the society, and that's why it is more lethal and needs to be checked more seriously. The prevalent ideologies that favor monolingualism, for example, or the use of standard dialect, is one example of it, because implicitly it favors the people who follow that norm-based standard accent, and takes others who cannot or do not speak that accent at disadvantage because they are not following that norm. In this context, it's useful to distinguish between a race as a socially constructed category, how it is used and divided openly and then in hidden manners, and racialization as a process of creating differences among people in a society. Racialism occurs not only when we categorize some people as black or white, or as Muslim or non-Muslims, but it occurs when black and uneducated, or in a similar vein, Muslims and terrorists become similar words. So that's where racism actually occurs. But tagging simply people would probably not amount to racism in the real sense. This process, as we have already discussed, involves some kind of ideological construction, and in this construction, we people do apply all kinds of apparatus, including legal, political, and social discrimination and oppression against people. This allows scholars to emphasize the need to account for the reality of racism without justifying racial categories, seeing race as an ideological construct which may be developed because of certain socio-political beliefs, and those beliefs which can be harmful for some group of people, maybe in a society or in a global community. As well as we need to see, as critical discourse analysts, that race is a product of racism and not the vice versa. Since there is racism, there is a divide based on color and race in the world. That's why we have such following of the word race, or the races in a community. If there would be no racism in the minds of people, there would be no race, and humans can live in a better world. That's what we can strive for as critical discourse analysts, researchers, and experts, as well as the learners of critical discourse analysts. So, in an ideal situation, a critical discourse analysis project in relation to racism can have two goals. One, to decode various kinds of open and hidden racism or racist views in a society, in institutional policies. At the same time, it can suggest alternatives to make a better world, a world who tries to suggest the ways in which racism or racist thoughts, words, discourses can be eliminated in a society, and alternative discourses can be generated.